Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Meade Lewis, CEO and founder of mIQroTech, the technology that leverages IoT devices and AI to predict pipeline leaks before they happen. Meade, I'm so excited to chat with you. Obviously, we got connected through a mutual connect, actually a previous guest from the show. So excited to see kind of promote other founders, but also learn about your story and kind of what your company is doing, leveraging AI in kind of an old archaic industry that has a lot of stereotypes that we'll talk about and dive into. But before we get into all that good stuff with mIQroTech and what you're working on, what were you doing before you started the company?
So before this, I was working with I was doing consulting for some agencies within the US.
And through that experience, I was listening to your TED talk, which we were riffing about earlier because of the Clicker debacle. I'm almost Clickergate is kind of how I want to promote it on the show, just to really kind of emphasize it. But no, in particular, what was interesting about what were you finding in the industry you chose? Because it's not a traditional industry of being like in oil and gas. What got you there, and what did you find that kind of threw you down this rabbit hole of starting companies within this industry?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always kind of a nerd. Rather than reading Harry Potter or something like that, my mom would get me encyclopedias. All right. And so I would go on these rants telling her what the temperature of magma was and how lightning was roughly 6 times hotter than the sun. And I was always fascinated with geology, especially.
Yeah.
In the third grade, my mom taught me how to code, but I always kept it as a hobby.
Yeah.
Making computer games, that was kind of my first business as a middle schooler, was like selling computer games literally on CD-ROMs. And I actually made a decent amount of money for a sixth grader, seventh grader making
Yeah.
these games. Made a gaming website that basically routed through a proxy server so that it could not be banned by the school's whitelists or blacklists of websites.
Yeah.
And so after that, I actually went to school for medicine and made software for a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. Made that
Yeah.
software piece in about a weekend. And what that software did was kind of rerun the logistics within our facility so that we could get
Yeah.
plasma extracted from human patients in a much more efficient manner. And so after that, I was kind of given the opportunity to either get into software full time or continue my education, and I chose software. I became a software engineer for an oil and gas firm. Within 6 months, I was their chief technology officer and managing, uh, 200 people.
Yeah.
Became a CTO of a second oil and gas firm. Both of those firms ended up exiting. I made a little money off of that. Co-founded an analytics firm, which we ended up selling to a federal group. And about 2 years later, I founded this company where we're kind of merging that background of oil and
Yeah.
gas analytics. And you could even go back to my medical experience with
Yeah.
diagnostics, right? And throwing that all together, shaking it around, and creating mIQroTech, right?
Yeah.
Where we're using my oil and gas experience as for the diagnostics and even the data capture piece, but the analytics piece, AI is AI is AI. It's just about
Right.
uh, uh, figuring out what the specific algorithm to your problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. And also just thinking about what were you uncovering? First of all, at each phase of the way, it sounds like you love systems and obviously correct me if I'm wrong. You love system and figuring out ways either to optimize it or scale it in a really unique way, using the rule set kind of within its framework. It's so fascinating to think about how you've been able to do that in oil and gas. And what were you seeing that where you were like, there's a system here, maybe it has some inefficiencies and there's a big kind of opportunity to not only add value, but also to create this new technology. What were you seeing in this consulting and analytics component that was like compelling to you to kind of solve other problems?
I don't think it is following the rules. I yeah, so like even at that pharmaceutical company, I talked to the manager of that specific facility, but we were violating the corporate IT policies by uploading my software, right? It wasn't
Yeah,
cleared by
sure.
corporate IT, right? No, it was
Yeah.
that could have been straight up malware that
Yeah.
we upload to those computer. Obviously, it wasn't for the record, but it was what I made in a weekend, right?
Yeah.
Even within this industry, right? It's an old school industry, all right? And this old school industry is opposed to change. I would love to say that, what I did at my two previous oil and gas roles where I was CTO, Advanced Upstream Solutions and Iron Pro, I would love to say that I was just top notch, really cutting edge, right? Steve
Yeah.
Jobs making the original, helping to market really the original Apple computers. But no. All right, what we were doing is that was what, 2014. And what we were doing is that was about the point that IoT became accessible to everyone,
Yeah.
right? Sensors were cheap. They were readily available. All right. And all it took was some tinkering around with a soldering iron
Yeah.
to put something together. And then after that, it's just code. And so I
Yeah.
had to teach myself for the prototype, at least the electrical engineering component. But after that, it's what I already knew. It was C code.
Yeah.
So it, getting back to it, I don't think it's about following the rules. I think it's about questioning why the rules exist
Yeah.
and trying to build a product that doesn't just follow the mainstream and solves the problems that you see by interacting within the industry that
Yeah.
you're within.
Yeah, yeah. And it's fascinating thinking about what microtech is doing now, adding the analytics or the AI component to offer a different level of intelligence and describe what essentially what the incumbent was before. Obviously, the technology, but it helps kind of, oil spills or inefficiencies within the process or downtime, things like that. What was the like previous procedure for those kind of like events and how is microtech changing that kind of experience?
S- So yeah, I'll talk about just typical statistics within the industry. All right. 70% of pipeline leaks in America are found through what's called visual detection. All right. And visual detection is just a
Yeah.
fluff term for a few different categories of pipeline leak finds. All right. There's visual flyovers where the oil and gas company either flies their own helicopters or contracts out a group to fly over their pipelines and spot if there's any areas of dead growth or flames shooting out of the ground or something like that, right? And then, but a lot of them actually are found by civilians where these people are just hunting in West Virginia and see that pillar of fire shooting out of the ground and have to call up their local natural gas firm. All
Wow.
right. And so if 70% are found through Hunter Sam walking around the woods, then you know that this industry needs to improve.
Yeah.
Alternatively, they're using technology that really hasn't been innovated upon since the 1970s. You have your traditional pressure transducers, which are threaded in. Rarely are they connected to anything wireless. Most of the time,
Yeah.
they have almost a USB download. And it's brought to a headquarters where then they throw this data into effectively a spreadsheet. And oh, the pressure dropped, and it really doesn't tell them anything because a lot of these oil and gas firms aren't hiring data scientists, true
Yeah.
data scientists, right? And I'm not just talking about what you see on LinkedIn where
Yeah.
somebody just knows all about, hey, Microsoft Excel, but true data
Yeah.
scientists, right? And so I think that this industry is ripe for disruption, and I think it's ready for it as well. A lot of these
Yeah.
firms are putting more and more money into their innovation departments, external and internal innovation,
Yeah.
and really trying to adopt these game-changing technologies as we start to go into Industry 4.0 and what it can become.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the reasons why new technologies weren't being adopted? What was it limitation? Because obviously money is being lost if there's any difference of whether it's pressure or loss of oil. So the pain's there, but what was why weren't people adopting or building new technology to start preemptively predicting versus probably figuring out ways to bandage it more quickly?
So uh, yeah, let's go about this two ways: the hardware and then the analytics side. Right, the hardware, so the sensors, all right, sensors, they used to be super expensive, right? And so, w there was only a limited number of firms making sensors that could withstand the pressures and the conditions that are within the oil and gas industry. Right. I once had somebody joke with me that the most advanced engineering, mechanical engineering that you'll ever find is subsea, deep space, and within oil and gas. Because
Really?
let's take a fracking rig. That flow iron is rated to withstand 22,000 psi. That's roughly twice as high as what the inside of a rifle barrel sees when you shoot the gun.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so you're
Yeah.
talking extreme pressures, right? And so having a pressure transducer, right, which is basically just a diaphragm pushing up on a wire mesh, having that withstand 22,000 psi, right? That's a tough challenge, right? And so I think it's that from the hardware perspective, just the cost of the hardware, the also the environmental issues in conjunction with the hardware, because if you're talking about a typical oil and gas asset, you're talking pretty remote. And so
Yeah.
that means to get that data from point A to point B, how are you doing that? Right? Now we
Yeah.
can use cellular towers, but those weren't around in the 1980s,
Yeah.
right? Or they
Yeah.
were around, but they weren't common, right? Like
Yeah.
they are today. And now let's talk about the analytics perspective, right? AI was invented in the 1950s, right?
Right.
And I'll caveat that with at least. You could argue that some of the computing that we were doing in the 1940s was AI, but 1950s, let's just say that. So it's been around for a bit. The problem is to get into this true deep learning, this neural network backed artificial intelligence, we didn't have the hardware that could even approach what we're doing today, right?
Right.
You oftentimes hear the joke that the iPhone generation 1 has several fold compute power that took us to the moon, right? So remember, the moon was 1969, right?
Yeah.
iPhone, what, 2008, something like that.
Right.
And so we're even talking about a shorter span there. So what we can do now with AI is well beyond what the researchers in the 1950s and 40s could ever dream of.
Yeah.
And I think that that's we can talk about the scary side of AI. That's a scary thing, is I think that we've just peeled back the first layer of the onion. Um,
Yeah.
oh,
One thing I think about, and I don't know if it's a contrarian opinion or perspective. I haven't researched this at all, but I was thinking about knowing about the machine learning kind of research that's been happening and how those frameworks have really dictated a lot of the advancements in AI. I'm like, are we moving towards kind of a more philosophical kind of based kind of way we build products, thinking kind of creating those rule systems within technology? Like what is allowing kind of, I guess for your company in particular, like what kind of rules are you putting on it to actually extract the data and make those analytics to actually draw those conclusions versus, I don't know, there's just so much in there that I'm sure it's hard to not only categorize, label, but also to make those assumptions or predictions. What are you doing in the technology to be able to do that?
right. So with any AI, you do need to put up philosophical barricades, right, in your engineering approach,
Yeah.
right? I mean, imagine if you made an AI-based dieting app, right?
Yeah.
And you told it you wanted to lose weight. Well, if that AI took it a step too far, what's the fastest way to lose weight? Never eat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Never eat and only live on the treadmill, right? And that's not healthy for humans, right?
Right.
And so when we talk about our artificial intelligence, what the philosophical things that we want to accomplish, right? How do you guarantee no pipeline leaks? Well, no oil and gas, right? And that's not practical in today's society. So we need to find a way to live with this oil and gas, whether we like it or not, whatever side of the political spectrum you fall on. We need
Yeah.
at least right now, we need to find a way to live with it, and that's
Yeah.
what we're aiming to accomplish here at microtech, is live
Yeah.
hand in hand with this industry that really helps us thrive as humans today.
Yeah.
And also the other the philosophical debate that we need to talk about with our company is, when do we alert the operator, right? Is it better
Yeah.
to give them false positives or false negatives, right?
Yeah.
just not alert them because it's right on the cusp? Do we alert them for this or do we not?
Mhm.
Right? And so if I was given that option, and I think many of my customers would feel the same way, yeah, alert. All right, because that leak, not only environmental damage, but the costs involved associated with these leaks are immense. All right. And that's also with our new hardware that we're coming out with next year. We're actually going to be able to attribute exact costs to what these leaks could end up affecting the customer with. So
Yeah.
help incentivize them.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. Is that what have you been able to do? Is it the advancement in the hardware or the relationship between the hardware and the software that's just improved because you've kind of been able to kind of keep it in a closed framework?
Yeah, so there's changes to the software. There's always changes to the software. But in this next version of the hardware, we're actually the big missing link was flow rate monitoring, and we weren't capable of doing that. We had ideas of how to accomplish it when we first started this company, but now we know exactly how to do it. We
Yeah.
filed the patents on it. And remember, we're measuring all of these variables: corrosion, pressure, density, vibration, temperature, geolocation, acoustics, flow rate, and density. I think I got them all.
Yeah.
Oh, also soil moisture. All right, got them all now. We're reading all of these external to the pipeline itself. So, what we're talking about here is leveraging physics in the most unique ways possible to be able to read, for example, corrosion from outside of the pipeline. Leads to faster installs, no invasive monitoring, which actually leads to 2% of pipeline leaks.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And thinking about just like the industry in all, because obviously begging the question, and I think you mentioned this in something I read of yours or listened to, where it was like, is there not enough people going into industries like oil and gas in particular? And I would love to hear a response to this hypothesis that I have is I feel that though a lot of people see it as having an end date, right? We all see like oil and gas having an essential end date where we then have the sustainable renewable energy. The more people I talk to within energy in particular know that that's not anything we'll see for a long time. So we have to figure out this kind of relationship with it and need a lot of innovation. What would you say? Am I kind of close to it? What would you add in that, or do you completely disagree?
So the end date, let's mention this for a second. The end date isn't going to be in my lifetime.
Yeah,
Probably is not going to be in my kid's lifetime. All right. Because the sad reality of it is we approach talking about energy as Americans, right? Where we have effectively unlimited money, right? Relatively. There if we want to solve something, we can just throw dollars at it, right?
yeah,
But when you talk about developing nations across the world, they can't just jump ahead to solar because of the cost. That's a real concern. I mean, I recently got a quote to put solar panels on my roof. All right.
yeah.
And they quoted me $120,000. All right. And
Insane.
luckily, I'm in a financial spot where, that's a
Right.
consideration. I do want solar on my house, but you're telling me that the average Joe is gonna shell out $120,000 to go off grid with their house? No,
Yeah,
no. It's a first world type problem,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so the end date is far further down the line than I think anybody's willing to talk about, and frankly, I think that that's because we need 3 geniuses, and when I say
yeah.
geniuses, I'm not just talking about your buddy Joe at the bar who's smarter than
It's
everybody else
really
in town.
smart. Yeah,
No, I'm talking about your Nikola Tesla, not Musk
yeah,
Tesla, but Nikola Tesla types, right? Those that Albert Einsteins, right? The just crazy intelligent people, people that are on a different plane. And the
yeah,
3 problems that they need to solve is energy storage. All right, we need a more efficient way of doing it. A lot of chemists believe that lithium ion is about as good as we can get with battery technology. We'll be fighting over scraps for an extra few percent worth of storage.
yeah,
All right. And we don't have enough lithium mines available to power this world off of lithium ion batteries. All right.
yeah.
So that's a problem. Solar panels. Solar panels are only about 19% efficient. All right. And then finally, actually converting that DC power into AC power. Our world works off of AC power. Solar panels and batteries put out DC power. And when you convert it from DC to AC, you lose about 30% of efficiency off the top. So you're talking about 19% efficient. It goes into the battery. You lose charge to the atmosphere when it's stored in a battery. And so you lose a few percent there. Then you lose another 30% when it's converted to actually be used by the end user.
Yeah.
All right. And so it's just, there's a lot of problems with it right now. And we need incredibly smart people to solve those problems. And while they're solving those problems, you can have people like me who are solving the problems within the more traditional energy sources today, right?
Yeah.
Oil,
Yeah.
natural gas, hopefully more natural gas and oil. And hopefully we get more involved in nuclear in the
Yeah.
future and even hydrogen production. But I digress. Going back to why I believe people are not getting as involved in oil and gas as they should. I think it's because it, it it's an accessibility problem.
Mm.
I think unless you grow up in Odessa, Texas, where you look around you and there's pump jacks everywhere, right?
Yeah.
There's drilling happening all around you, right? And it's fundamental to your community. I think it seems intangible to a lot of people.
Yeah.
They know that the oil and gas industry exists, but it's never something that they actually dream of going into.
Yeah.
Which is sad because there's so much innovation that needs to happen here. It is a fascinating industry. Remember some of the most incredible mechanical engineering in the world. You're talking about geology and rocks and
Yeah.
the environment and money and everything. I mean, there's a role in oil and gas for everybody.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was gonna also, yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
add that with the, I'm excited about the popularity, the gaining in popularity that AI has, obviously with ChatGPT, kind of pushing it to the mainstream, but realizing its actual potential in companies like yours and seeing maybe that's the bridge. Maybe it's can I use this cool piece of technology and innovation in something like oil and gas or healthcare or something that you don't necessarily think about as in needing the cutting edge. But I don't know. I feel like things are shifting in a way that we see use cases for particular things and like to think about ways we can replicate in other industries. I'm not
well,
sure.
just look at the industry of asset management. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
people that have started billion-dollar companies just throwing GPSs into trucks.
Yeah.
All right. And then sending that data to the cloud wirelessly to then be viewed on some dashboard that you probably could have paid a college student $10,000 to write that GUI, graphic user
Yeah.
interface, right? I mean, fundamentally, that's so easy, right? A GPS
Right.
chip is like, you can buy a breakout board of a GPS board for like $15. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, hardware costs just with barely engineering it. You're talking about like $80 to build one of those yourselves just as a prototype, right?
Yeah.
And you're telling me that started a billion-dollar company, right? And so there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there, whether it's in oil and gas or trucking or vessel transport on the water or the DoD, right? There's a lot of problems due to the bureaucracy within the Department of Defense that they're trying to solve, right? I know there's legislation coming out about making the Humvees, or there's been discussion of legislation anyway, of making the Humvees electric. And what a more brilliant thing to do, right? Assuming that you can armor the batteries and you
Sure.
choose non-flammable chemistries, etc., right? But that's brilliant. How far are those Humvees driving every day?
Yeah.
Not very
Yeah.
far, right? They're just
Yeah.
clearing
Good
out an area,
patrols.
coming back home,
Sure.
right? And so you can just have solar panels, never have to ship in your own gasoline or diesel. All right, you electric cars have like 90% less maintenance than an internal combustion engine
Mm.
vehicle. So, I mean, there's just so many places that
Yeah.
just small improvements mean the world of difference to the industry.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about obviously shifting gears back to microtech, what's been exciting about what traction you've seen thus far? And obviously you talked about some hardware kind of upgrades, but what's particularly exciting about kind of the next milestone you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, so next milestone, we're closing a large fundraising round actually as we speak now, a
Right?
huge
Yeah.
fundraising round. So with that money, $21 million, we're really hoping to expand our market internationally. So we have a
Yeah.
few international clients, but they're kind of far and few between. We have one in Italy. We're working with Japan now, Middle East, etc., Chile. But really, what we want to do is make sure that we go global with our mission, right? And so that
Yeah.
means finding powerful distribution partners, of which we have a number that we're signing up right now.
Yeah.
What that also means is expansion of our technology stack, especially on the artificial intelligence front, because I believe what's more incredible than our hardware is our data and what we
Yeah.
can do with it and what type of questions we can solve for this industry. And it kind of positioning us more as a Palantir than as a Schlumberger, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It was interesting. I'm thinking about what you said about the partnerships component, and I guess my question is, what has to go well, or what would you predict will go well that will essentially help your company become massively adopted? Because for me, it makes sense, right? Every pipeline should have better sensors, have more intelligent ways to not only track but also extract data, and then on top of that, be predictive so that you don't get to that critical state. Like it all makes sense to me, but that mass adoption, getting people to use the product and get on board and integrated, what has to go well for that to happen?
I really do think it's just within this industry who you partner with. All right.
Yeah,
Once again, it's a small industry, but a huge industry, right? So
yeah,
everybody knows each other, right? And if you find the right folks to champion your product, it will go everywhere. All right.
yeah,
And so working with these distributors that know all of these potential champions, that's really the next goal to take us all everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
Who
that
are those
strengthens our
champions?
what?
Who are those champions? Just out of if they were listening to the show and be like, "Oh man, I could totally help Meade out."
So yeah. So definitely within the US, some of the biggest ones are Kinder Morgan. All right.
Mm,
You also have Enbridge. You have your traditional super majors, Chevron, Exxon, Phillips 66,
yeah,
Shell, right? But really my two Moby Dicks are Kinder Morgan and Enbridge.
yeah,
They're massive firms that really know what they're doing. They do their best to operate in the most efficient and safe manners, right? And so they are really a great group, two great groups that I would like to
yeah,
find a way to work with.
yeah,
As
yeah.
far as
And thinking of
distribution is concerned,
yeah,
we're actually looking to partner with a large Japanese hyper conglomerate within the next month.
that's exciting, man. Whether it's not to think about the pessimistic side, but whether it's external or internal, what would you say was some of the biggest risks for your company facing today?
Yeah, so we're closing the Series B, and by Series B, it's all about scalability, right?
Yeah,
Seed, pre-seed, it's about
product
building a
market.
prototype, product market fit type questions. All right. Series A is can you deploy, period. All right. Series
GTM.
B is about scalability, right? And so a lot of this has been de-risked, but probably the riskiest things right now would be macroeconomy. All right. I think that there's definitely some turmoil happening in the macroeconomy right now that
Yeah.
we do not directly impact. And so that should cause some concerns for any startup, right? Look at what happened to Silicon Valley Bank,
Yeah.
right? And for a smaller firm, right? Let's say that you had 250,000 in funding sitting in Silicon Valley Bank, right? That's devastating for you.
Yeah.
But at that point, everybody's used
Yeah.
to not working without a paycheck, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to be fine. But for a larger firm, could you imagine if that would have happened to like, I don't know, a Walgreens or something? And they had all their money in Silicon Valley Bank, right? All of a sudden people aren't getting paychecks at fucking Walgreens.
Yeah.
All right. the mass panic of that. And so it's a concern, the macro economy, but more localized than that to microtech. It's about hiring the right people. Some of the biggest challenges I've ever had is just hiring the right people. All right. I mean, they they are both the greatest asset to any company, but also the greatest liability, right? Because especially early stages where, let's say, you are that company that has $250,000, all right, and you're looking to hire your first engineer, right? This person asks for a $120,000 salary, and you have two people who want the job, right, for the same amount of
Yeah.
money. If you pick wrong, your company is over.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't get much time with that engineer, and if they don't get it done on time, you're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so hiring that right person is so
Yeah.
critical, especially early stages where you don't have the redundancy.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking if everything does go well, what's the long-term vision?
Long-term vision. So I see a few opportunities. So we're looking at really starting this new product line that I'll talk to you about next year. A new product line that we're hoping to really be releasing to the public next year. But that will answer the age-old IPO or acquisition question,
Sure.
right? Once we release that, within a year after release, we will know whether or not we are destined for IPO or acquisition. If
Yeah.
IPO, then I expect that to happen within the next 3 years from today. If acquisition, I would expect within 2 years. All right,
Yeah.
and the potential acquirers would be probably firms that would surprise you. IBM, NVIDIA, Palantir, even
Yeah.
Amazon. All right, and that's because IBM tried to sell Watson to the oil and gas industry, spent billions trying to
Yeah.
do it, and failed. And the reason why they failed is just why every other AI company that in this situation will fail. Bad
Yeah.
data. All right,
Yeah.
if you feed an AI algorithm bad data, it's going to get bad results every
Yeah.
single time. And this
Yeah.
industry, it's full of bad data. And so that's
Yeah.
why we do a hardware solution in conjunction with the AI solution, is because without the hardware, we'd be relying on that unreliable data.
Yeah. Do you think
Furthermore,
also
yeah.
I was gonna say, do you think also part of your edge is just knowing and having the experience in the industry? I feel like a lot of AI companies come from it from an outsider coming in, but seeing that you can leverage it within is interesting.
I think
But
that
you also be
probably
kind of a
more on our
technology company.
strategy side, not necessarily the AI side, because with uh, guided AI, all right, where basically let's kind of go through a theoretical how AI works within our system, right?
Yeah.
How AI would work in our system is basically we see an event. All right, let's say say we see a huge vibration spike, all right, and we're hearing something on the acoustic monitoring, and that's a red flag. Okay. Any statistical algorithm, standard deviation is picking it up, right?
Right.
Bayesian statistics can pick it up, right? Fourier transforms can pick it up, right? Once it's red flagged, it would then go to is some form of AI comparative algorithm, right? Where we are comparing what we're seeing there, this new instance, with previous fingerprints of issues that we've seen in the
Yeah.
past, right? And if we can match a fingerprint to what we're currently seeing, then all of a sudden we have some percentage of likelihood that that's what's actually going on. And we can
Yeah.
alert the operator differently depending on the threat, right? Is it a tree falling near the pipeline, or is it an unauthorized excavator digging up the pipeline, right? Those need very different responses. One's a non issue, right? Who cares if a tree's fallen in the woods, right? And then an excavator digging up your pipeline, that's a massive issue. That's code red, get helicopters out there.
Yeah. I love this next section. I call my founder FAQ. So I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions and we'll see where we get. I always like to drop stuff. I always like to open it up with what in particular is hard about your job day to day?
People.
Yeah.
Not
And what in particular?
I'm not a people person. actually probably an obligate extrovert. I it's if you were to ask most people, they would say I'm an extrovert. But when the day's done, dude, I just want
Don't
to
talk to me.
work on like a woodworking project I have going on in the garage or garden or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say is something professionally or at your company, what's something that you spend a lot of time on that you would wish wish you spent less, and something you spend little time on that you wish you could spend more on?
Probably finances and capital raising,
Yeah.
all right, is what I spend a lot of time on that I wish I didn't have to spend the time on.
Yeah.
What I wish I got to spend more time on is kind of this vision making and what could we become and what if we tinker
Yeah.
that at this sensor, what could that do to our analytics, right?
Yeah.
The real
Yeah.
CTO type stuff. I do miss that role.
Yeah. And what in particular, you mentioned something like seeing this company grow, you can really answer some really deep questions about whether it's energy or oil and gas. What in particular do you hypothesize you could have an effect on that? You're not necessarily impacting now, but if the technology goes in the direction you want it to, what's something that you kind of think you can have a significant impact on?
Everything.
Yeah.
Think of insurance. All right. These pipelines are insured. I would be able to say what the safe pipelines are to insure. All
Yeah.
right. Talk about warfare. All right. If we were on the pipeline in the Baltic that mysteriously was blown up, right? I could have told you exactly when it happened, could have probably given you the category of explosive that was used,
Yeah.
and therefore it would have vastly eliminated who the potential people
Yeah.
were that caused that. Okay.
Yeah.
And also by monitoring that flow rate, we probably could have predicted this Russian invasion before it even
Yeah.
happened. All right. And
Yeah.
think about Wall Street commodities traders. Okay. With these insights, it would be dangerous.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
They'd be printing money. All
Yeah.
right. And so it goes on and on and on from there. Even gas prices, right? If I could snap my fingers and we were on every pipeline in the world, I could tell you how much gas is going to cost 6, 10 months from now, because it
Yeah.
takes about that time to go from wellhead to refined product that you're buying at the gas station.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I was thinking about when researching your company and your product is like, is there going to be a point where your product is so good that you essentially just like don't have a market anymore? You've created such good analytics that has a result in creating amazing hardware that is, say, impenetrable. You can predict any flood or any instance. Like, will you think you'll ever build to outmarket yourself, or do you think you'll just find new
So,
problems?
so I think we'll reach market saturation, right? There you always reach market saturation, right? Everybody owns a phone, most of which own an iPhone, right? So you reach this level of market saturation where everybody else is fighting for the scraps, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that will be a lead contender for that market saturation dominance. But for the additional revenues that we would need, we can bring this to any other industry. All right, whether that's hydrogen, CO2 sequestration, domestic water. 30% of the US's water is leaked.
Yeah.
All right, yet we have water crises in California, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, we can bring it all over the place. We can start to get into ag tech. We can start branching out into tangential industries. And actually, that would improve our statistics, because take that Farmer Joe excavating his field and striking a pipeline.
And
When do you think Farmer Joe is most likely to be excavating his field? Probably
yeah.
not during
Probably.
growing season.
Yeah.
It's going to be either
Yeah.
right at the beginning of growing season, right at the end, or when there are no crops in the ground, right? And if we can say, okay, within these 3 months, this pipeline is at higher risk because it's not growing season, and this farmer grows soy, which growing season is between X month and Y month, all of a sudden our
Yeah.
analytics just got a lot better just by including one other industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the flow tracker, that I think innovation, that level of change in your company is going to be game changer. Just having the ability to track the flow, predict when those changes are, and how that's going to impact from beginning to end. I mean, that's going to be exciting to see where that takes you. Maybe we'll have to do another podcast in a year once that kind of gets underway and start to really kind of bring some awesome intelligence, I think, to a lot of this industry and others alike. Well, Meade, I know we're coming to the close of the show, and I know I love to ask this question. So, just to jump out with it, what books or people have influenced or impacted you the most, whether it was now or early in your career? What's lasted in your head?
Jonathan Maxwell's Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. Scott Galloway's Algebra of Happiness. Actually, one that really impacted how I go about conflict is Jocko Willick's Extreme Ownership. All right.
Yeah.
So I love books, read a lot on leadership and business. Scott Galloway is by far my favorite author, excuse me. Guy's just fucking hilarious. But as far as people are concerned, my father-in-law is an incredible man. Paul Silvis, he's on my board. He's really kind of been this business idol I've had growing up since childhood. Paul Silvis is such a brilliant man.
Yeah.
And
Anything that you've taken for advice or perspective or mantra, anything that's helped that other founders can use?
difference between a bad haircut and a good haircut is 2 days, right? And similarly, right, that's all of our problems, right?
Yeah.
One of another person that's influenced me a lot is James Smedley, my patent attorney. All right.
Yeah.
And one time he told me something very similar. Nothing's ever as good as it seems. Nothing is as ever bad as it seems.
Yeah.
All right. And I think that's solid advice because at the end of the day, startup land is just about not giving up. The startup doesn't die because you're out of money. The startup doesn't die if, your COO quits. All right. The startup doesn't die no matter what happens until you quit.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The IP is still there. It's still alive. It's just how much are you willing to put into it? Right.
Yeah.
And
Well
so
said.
just realizing that times get rough, times get better, right? Startup land is the bipolar. It's very bipolar in the highs and lows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's well said, man. I know we're coming to the end of this show and I want to give a chance to give us your plugs and where we can find you. But before we do that, is there any question I asked you or I didn't ask you that I should have, anything we left on the table here today?
Not that I can think of. We talked about a lot today. Yeah, but if anybody wants to learn more about what we're accomplishing at mIQroTech, if they're interested in a job, or Kinder Morgan or Enbridge, if you're listening, you can reach out to me via Meade, MEADE, Lewis, LEWIS, at mIQroTech, mIQroTech.com, or visit the website, microtech.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Don't friend me on Facebook, please.
We'll find you. You'll find your Facebook, maybe an archive, MySpace, or maybe a Tumblr. We don't know where you're at.
Never did MySpace or Tumblr.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I'm just kidding. Meade, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, man, talking about your early experience, but also the oil and gas industry, what innovation you're bringing to it, how more people can do it also and get involved, but what this would mean in terms of how it can impact not only your industry in oil and gas, but others alike. It's been so exciting chatting with you and having this conversation. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you again for being on Behind Company Lines.
It's great being here. Thank you.